You're listening to Upstream with Shane Morris on the Colson Center Podcast Network.
Welcome to Upstream. I'm Shane Morris. Just a few years after I was born, Chuck Colson had an idea that his work in the prison system, which he'd already been doing for years, was really a rescue operation downstream, where bad beliefs had become bad habits and behaviors and badly damaged lives even. Chuck realized that the culture bore a lot of blame for our ballooning prison population, that incarceration was ultimately connected with ideas. Well, of course, longtime listeners will know he started Breakpoint after that, a 4-minute daily Worldview commentary that's still going strong today, nearly 30 years later. But not everyone will know that Chuck went on to found a much more intensive and involved program to help Christians understand and apply their faith. Back then, it was called the Centurions Program, and Chuck very much intended to produce an army. Today, it has a new name in honor of its founder, but the Colson Fellows program remains one of the most life-changing learning and discipleship opportunities out there, and it's adapted and grown in many key ways over the last few years to maximize its impact for good on those who embark on this 10-month journey. Today, I'm joined by the national director of the Colson Fellows program, Michael Craven. Michael is a one-time executive who left corporate America for ministry 20 years ago. Since then, he's won quite a few hats: apologist, urban ministry leader, and author of the book Uncompromised Faith, Overcoming Our Culturalized Christianity. He's also the founder of the Center for Christ and Culture and served as president of Bridge Builders, which in many ways paralleled Chuck's calling, working to transform the culture of poverty in inner city communities. Last but not least, he's easily the most stylish and well-groomed member of the Colson Center team, and someone I've very much enjoyed chatting with in the past. So, Michael, I've been looking forward to having you on the podcast. Welcome, brother.
Me too, Shane. Great to be with you.
How do you introduce yourself on elevators? Because the introduction that I just went through for you was multifaceted, to say the least. When someone says, "So, Michael, what's your deal? Who are you? What do you do?" How do you respond to that in just a few seconds?
Yeah, gosh, that's a good one. I was always told the more important you are, the shorter your introduction is, such as the President of the United States. That's all that need be said. Well, evidently, I need a really long introduction because I lack importance. So,
don't be too hard on yourself, Michael. I think if you just pick one of those titles, maybe like Colson Fellows Director, you'll probably do just fine with that on elevators.
For me, it's interesting. If I think back 20, 25 years from now, and I recall having a conversation with one of our pastors on staff at the church where we were attending, and he asked, "What is it that you think the Lord is calling you to do?" And this was, of course, in the midst of this time where I was really feeling like the Lord was leading me out of one career and into another. And I said, honestly, the only thing I can say is I want to stand up in front of this church and scream, "Wake up." And that if anything accurately described what animates my life and mission, that would be it, is screaming, "Wake up" to the church in America.
There was this radio minute growing up. I'd ride to work with my dad, and Earl Pitts and the Redneck Rant came on. Did you ever hear that one?
No.
Where it's hysterical, where he rants for a minute about some aspect of culture or society that he's angry about, and he's voicing a redneck, and then at the end of every one he goes, "Wake up, America." That's kind of sounds like what you're describing there, and it plays the Washington Post march and everything.
Yeah, that would be the phrase that would capture the essence of what gets me up every morning.
Well, how did this multifaceted background in your mind prepare you to lead the Colson Fellows program? Because you've been at the helm now for what, a couple of years, 3 going on 3?
A little over 2 years, but
Okay.
25 months.
Okay.
And again, if I think back to those influences that I had in my life, I was deeply, profoundly influenced by the work of Francis Schaeffer, in my late 20s, and this really revolutionized my Christian faith. It exposed me to a world of ideas that previously was unbeknownst to me. And I just remember being struck by the fact that evidently Christians had thought deeply about every aspect of life and reality. And they did so in a very theologically informed way. And as a result, they were able to formulate meaningful questions to life's most difficult answers. And yet the world in which I was living was a world that seemed to have forgotten those questions as well as those answers. And that just really piqued an interest in me as to answering the question in my own life: what happened? How did we get to this point? I'm at this stage, I'm raising young children. And of course, as you well know, the moment you bring children in the world, you start thinking about the type of world they're coming into, right? Well, this is certainly the case for me. And I wasn't pleased with the trajectory and direction of our culture. And I just wanted to understand, in light of what Schaeffer introduced me to, I wanted to understand what happened. How did this robust, intellectual, all-encompassing contribution that the church had historically made, how did this dissipate to where we found ourselves living in this somewhat vacuous evangelical world that reduces the entire gospel, but nothing but the personal plan of salvation? And apart from that, most Christians are left really wondering, why am I here and what am I supposed to do other than evangelize? And that really led me to begin to understand and study and read and really understand the history of the church, and more specifically the history of the American church, and what were some of those influences that have shaped us in ways that we find ourselves at this particular moment in culture.
Isn't it interesting that figures like Schaeffer figure so prominently in the beginning of this whole worldview movement? Because Schaeffer is reformed in his thinking, and as many of the other worldview thinkers were. And Abraham Kuyper is another that we often refer to, who hails from that continental Reformed tradition in his case, and then there are many from the Presbyterian tradition over in the British Isles, and they have this view of man, right, that is it's total depravity. It's centered on the idea that sin has radically wrecked our consciousnesses and our morality and our thinking. Even the noetic effects of the fall is what they call it. And yet many of these same thinkers are the most interested in claiming every square inch for Christ and going out there and actually having a sort of optimistic, spiritually militaristic or conquest-centered view of creation, that this really belongs to King Jesus. Every man, woman, and child belongs to him, and every institution belongs to him, and that we have to go out and actually assert that primacy of Christ in every sphere of life. But what do you think is going on there, where there seems to be a kind of, instead of a defeatism about mankind, there's this radical optimism and even a sense of calling to go out and claim these things?
Well, I think if you had to pinpoint one thing, I think it's that they have a kingdom theology. They don't have an escapist theology. They don't understand this Christian life as that we are passing through on our way to someplace else, but the fact that Christ has come, is coming, and one day is fully come, and his kingdom is fully, completely, and finally consummated on this earth. That Christ is exercising dominion, and he invites us into that activity. That there's nothing escapist with regard to this world about being a Christian. It is this world that Jesus is making new. And I think they understood that. And they lived it, and it compelled them to think about the life beyond themselves. And I'm always struck by, you look in Genesis 3 and you see the sequential break in 4 essential relationships: our relationship with God, our relationship with ourselves, others, and ultimately creation. And in today's modern evangelical context, I think most of our churches find themselves focusing on those first 2 relationships, teaching the Christian how to live in right relationship with God, how to appropriate a right relationship with God through Christ Jesus, repentance, forgiveness, ask Jesus into your life, et cetera, and then they focus largely on sort of the therapeutic aspects of the gospel, which contends with dealing with the self. But what they really neglect is teaching the church how to live in right relationship with their neighbors and with creation, and understanding that embedded in this larger concept of creation is everything that we bump up against, encounter, rub up against, deal with in our real lives. And that would include politics, economics, science, technology, art, entertainment, all the things that constitute life. And they thought deeply about these things. And as Jesus taught us to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, the moment we utter those words, we lay claim for Christ to this earth and everything in it and say, this all belongs to our Lord. And he is making all things new. He is setting to right everything that sin has set wrong.
Let's talk about the story of the Colson Fellows and how it came about here, because there's this mythology out there that I don't know how many people still remember it, but the Washington Post, I believe, was the one that ran this piece years ago before Chuck passed away about the Centurions program. And it said that in the Centurions program, Chuck Colson is attempting to clone himself at the end of his life. You know, he wants to create an army of little clones to go out there and take over the world for him. And we really enjoyed that. Everyone at Prison Fellowship and at Breakpoint, which was at the time a division of Prison Fellowship, got a kick out of that. And I actually did this cartoon where I photoshopped Chuck onto Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers movie, and then a bunch of little mini Chucks coming out of the machine, and he's like, I shall call them mini Chucks. And that picture actually ended up in the Chuck Colson Memorial Room at Prison Fellowship, and to the best of my knowledge, it's still there today. So that's the Washington Post's version. I think it was the Washington Post of how the Centurions program came about. But tell us, Michael, how what the real story behind it is, and then how that story has developed into where it is today.
Well, as you alluded to earlier, Chuck realized while working in the prison that the folks that he was dealing with, working with, ministering to, the issues that led them to that particular place had their origins upstream in culture. They were the ideas in which they swam and imbibed and they breathed in without a great deal of thought. It's just sort of like the fish in the water. And yet, if you order your lives around these ideas that are not true, then, as the philosopher said, you can't go against the grain of the universe and not get splinters. You're going to get splinters. And Chuck realized that we needed to embark on an effort to really take people much deeper into understanding how Christianity not only shapes, but gives us legitimate answers to the ultimate question of how shall I live? You know, it's the book that Schaeffer wrote, and then he subsequently wrote another version, How Now Shall I Live? How now shall we live? This is the question. At least it's the question for the introspective person, the reflective person. How am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to know what is the right way? And it's worldview. It's the analysis of what is the proper ordering of human life. What is the proper ordering of society? What is the proper ordering of family? Christianity has answers to every single one of these questions, and they're rich, robust, and meaningful answers that are tested throughout time. They can be tested. You know, people can argue all day long about various philosophical assertions, but we could take, for example, the assertion that gravity is a natural law. We can argue about it till we're blue in the face, but I can take you up to the roof of the house and we can test it real fast, and we'll see which theory proves true. I would say the same is true of moral law as well, and that's what Chuck understood.
So talk to us now about the Colson Fellows program itself, as it's evolved over the years and how it currently exists. What is it that makes it so unique? Why is it that you have such a passion for it? And how do you think it really complements rather than replacing the calling and work of the church?
Yeah. Well, a little history would probably be helpful. So when Chuck started the program, his vision was really to focus on people that were serving in the commanding heights of culture, Christians who were in traditional leadership roles, bring them into a rich experience train them to think Christianly about every aspect of life and reality. In other words, equip them with a Christian worldview, which, again, you and I have had this conversation before. This is not simply the acquisition of knowledge, but it's more accurately the acquisition of a skill, one that the Bible refers to as wisdom. It's this analytical skill. It's this ability to discern what is true and good and beautiful. And that's what we talk about when we talk about worldview. We're talking about worldview as wisdom. We're not talking about worldview as a set of arguments or a polemic. But worldview is wisdom. This ability to think Christianly about the world and arrive at Christian or biblical answers to the questions. And so he wanted to do this for people that were serving in traditional leadership roles so they could exercise this influence in their respective roles and subsequently reshape culture, create culture, and create good culture, because everybody's creating culture. The question is it good culture or is it bad culture? But over the years, obviously the culture has continued to evolve and change, and it changes rapidly. It's changing probably more rapidly than ever before in history right now. And following Chuck's death, the program took a 2-year hiatus, and John reached out to his longtime mentor, Dr. Bill Brown, asked Bill to come in and take a look and consider reviving the program, which he did. And the thing that Bill brought to the program that was really unique and in hindsight represented a pretty significant shift in terms of new direction, was the nature of the curriculum that Bill put together was more of a very intensive whole life discipleship program that yields a robust public theology. It was much less of a very exclusive leadership program. And again, a program that was geared toward the whole church, the everyday Christian who seeks to gain wisdom, live faithfully, and act courageously in an ever-changing, ever-confusing, ever-challenging culture. So today, what is evident to us, and why I'm so passionate about the Colson Fellows program, is I think it's meeting the church at one of its most fundamental points of need. Because it's answering the question, how do I understand the times in which I live and know how to live faithfully in them? Not just survive them, but live faithfully in them. And as we see students come through the program, they enter with one set of expectations. Most often, that set of expectations centers around, I want to learn worldview. I want to gain some knowledge. I want to go out into the world. I want to be able to participate in conversations with people who don't think the way I think. And I want to persuade them that there is a better way of thinking. There's a better way of understanding this situation or that situation. But here's what happens. That may be the motivation for coming into the program. What happens when they go through the program is they experience a transformation that they were not expecting. And that is that God's story becomes enlarged in their lives. And they find that they are not necessarily, it's not that they've invited Jesus into their lives, but that Jesus is inviting us into his.
I like that.
And that's a big shift in paradigm for the American evangelical, I think. And now the story gets so much bigger. Our purpose deepens. Our meaning becomes much more secure. And more importantly, we begin to gain some knowledge that does give us the ability to interpret the times in which we live and know how to live faithfully in them.
I love this distinction you've made between, worldview as wisdom and worldview as a set of predetermined apologetic answers, or perhaps a rubric you can use to understand, put everyone in a box and then understand them. Not that there's anything wrong with things like the worldview grid and so forth. And that's a great contribution from Summit, for instance. But there is a danger that emerges in, learning basic summarized answers about other ways of looking at reality that, number one, you can come to caricature them and think that you've got it all figured out. And then you encounter someone who really, a wise person who has another worldview, and you think, oh, wow, I wasn't ready for this. And number two, I think you really can get to a place where you're not treating people as human beings, where you're really just sort of applying a formula and failing to engage them on the level that you need to. And that comes down to, a lot of times, this belief that we get subtly inculcated with in the church too often, which is that, our mission is to get people out of their humanity and to go somewhere else, to do something else, to be ultra spiritual and to join our club. In reality, it's that God has, invited us into his story, and his story involves all of the creation that he designed to work a certain way. Christians are the people who are inviting everyone else to be truly human again. We're inviting them back into restored fellowship with God and with one another, and saying, hey, all the stuff that you desire is actually here in God's way of doing things. And that's what wisdom means. And it doesn't often manifest as this really pat and predetermined set of answers. A lot of times wisdom looks like just knowing how to deal with situations in a way that affirms people's humanity and their, what we would call, the image of God. And people recognize that. I think even those who are committed to a different worldview and are very well trained in that, they'll look at you dealing with them on that level, and they'll say, oh, wow, that is a wise person. That's a considerate person. And I remember when I first heard this wisdom association, I didn't really get it, because wisdom sounded like too small a word for me. Worldview, it despite its Enlightenment roots, it sounded like, wow, that's something big. That's this thing that we can harness and learn all about how to view reality as a Christian. But the problem with that is you begin to kind of think on some level, or can think, that Christianity is just one way of looking at the world, and that there are a lot of other ways of looking at the world, and potentially, partially valid ways of looking at the world. But that's not how it is. In reality, God made this world. It's his world. There's only one right way of looking at it. Every other way is a distortion of reality. You're trying to invent a different world that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, how many Christians can share the experience when somebody who is in crisis, who may not be a believer, reaches out to them because they've been in relationship with them? And why is that? It's because they recognize that person is in possession of something they need, wisdom. They want somebody that can help them reorder the disorder that has come into their lives. Apparently, some sort of extreme disorder, some sort of chaotic experience, encounter, something has happened to rock their world and shake their stability, shake their illusions, if you will, of what they've placed their faith in. And what do? Quite often they'll reach out to that Christian they've had in their lives for many, many years, and they've had those arguments and contentious discussions. But in that crisis moment, what they're looking for, though they may not know it, is they're looking for wisdom. They want to know how to be fully human in the wake of something that may be tragic or challenging.
Yeah. So the Colson Fellows program is really for super academic people, right? It's not the sort of thing that a lay person should get into. I mean, this is heady stuff, right?
Well, that's kind of how people used to perceive it. Is,
right.
It's one of the questions that people would often ask themselves or ask us is, am I smart enough to do this?
Have you ever had to tell someone no?
Yeah, but I was related to them.
Okay.
So it was fine,
Made family get-togethers awkward then after that.
Look, I just don't think this is for you. No. And that's one of the things that we changed, is we wanted to move away from this somewhat exclusive posture that kind of began with the implied question, are you smart enough to do this? This is a challenging program. It is a demanding program. But I would argue that following Jesus is a challenging program. It's demanding. And there is a need for every Christian, regardless of their academic background, to cultivate an intellectual life, to grow in their knowledge of the Lord, to walk in wisdom, to renew their minds, to replace their, as the Southern pastor said, their stinking thinking with biblical thinking. And you know, given the way we've restructured the program, where now we deliver it through these small cohorts, regional cohorts, either regional cohorts that are in about 50 cities around the country, or through online cohorts, both are intensely communal. So for the person that may feel insecure academically or intellectually, they're going to get lots of support that will nurture them through the program. Yes, they're going to do a lot of reading. There's about 14 books they're going to read. But I've always argued you got to read to lead. It's how you learn. It's how you grow. And as you know, the more challenging things you read, they get easier and easier and easier. You become acquainted with a larger body of ideas and concepts that you see repeated over and over in various works. And you go, oh, I know what that means.
Yeah.
So we invite people, basically every Christian who desires to gain wisdom, who wants to know how to live faithfully in tumultuous times, in a post-Christian culture, a post-truth culture, an increasingly hostile culture, and live courageously in those times. I think that's who this program is for. And again, if they're intimidated intellectually, that's okay. They're going to get lots of support getting through.
How does it look practically? So I joined the Colson Fellows program. I begin the reading, the discussions. Perhaps I have a regional cohort that I can meet with once a month. How does the whole process look? And then what can those who join expect to know and have received at the end of that 10-month period?
So we are going to kick off the application. We're going to open applications up February 3rd. And so students will be able to go to the website, colsonfellows.org, or prospective students, and fill out the application. We've streamlined that application to make it less intimidating than it used to be. It used to be very intimidating. It isn't any longer.
You actually had to do a thesis before.
Pretty much.
In order to get in, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And but now we just want to gather information about you, find out where you are in your spiritual life, your spiritual formation, bring you into the program. Pre-reading will begin July 1st for the month of July, and then the course opens up online August 1st. You're connected to either a regional cohort if you happen to live near one, or an online cohort. And your cohort leaders, these are folks that have all been through the program. There's generally a pretty good sized leadership team that takes you on, if you will, brings you into their cohort, into their community. We limit our cohorts to about 15 to 20 students. We want to keep them small, so there's opportunity for dialogue and discussion. And these cohorts will meet each month, and it's a tremendous opportunity. They're primarily student-led. The monthly meetings are primarily student-led. The goal of which is to give participants the opportunity to verbally process in community what it is that they're learning, studying, because our experience has been that so much of what they're reading is, in many cases, they're encountering for the first time. They got a lot of questions, and it's sort of shattering some old paradigms. It's expanding their world. It's expanding their conceptions of what it means to be a Christ follower. In really wonderful and often dramatic ways. and this necessarily will provoke some questions. So putting people in community where they can discuss that with their fellow learners, as well as those who've been through the program, has proven to be incredibly helpful. The course is 10 months long. And during that, as I said, they're going to be reading about 14 books this coming year. And they will attend 2 webinars each month, oftentimes with one of the authors of the books they're reading. as well as our faculty that includes John Stonestreet and Bill Brown and Oz Guinness and other many notable thinkers and figures working in this arena today. And then they complete the coursework, and all are commissioned. Nobody graduates from the Colson Fellows program. They are then sent out as being commissioned missionaries out into the world as Colson Fellows each May. We hold a very large national commissioning ceremony and Wilberforce weekend, which this forthcoming year will be in Fort Worth, Texas. And that's just an incredible opportunity to gather not only with students around the country. This year, we've got almost 500 students in the program, but also alumni. There's about 2,000 alumni around the world. And we're opening up into international cohorts. We've got 5 international cohorts this year, and continuing to expand cohorts in cities across the country.
I'm glad you didn't give our listeners all the details on the hazing ritual that takes place there at the commissioning, because
no, we keep that a secret along with the handshake.
Yeah, it's extremely harrowing. I've watched it several times. Michael, I don't want you to give me the syllabus here, but talk to me for a moment about some of your favorite books that the Colson Fellows go through and get to discuss, because there's there's a variety of topics in these 14 books, and it really covers a huge amount of ground. Which ones are your favorites?
Well, Chuck's book, How Now Shall We Live, is a part of the core curriculum and has been for many, many years. It remains an exceptional resource for really diving deep into what do we mean when we talk about Christian worldview, especially practically speaking. Because Chuck does not deal with Christian worldview in a purely philosophical sense. He grounds it in reality. And I think this is exceptionally helpful. So that book is one of the most impactful books that students will read. It was certainly impactful in my life when it came out in the late 90s. It had a huge impact on me at a time when I was going through my own internal struggles and changes in terms of what I felt like I was here to do, and really moving from this sort of cultural evangelical mindset that here's my life, my plans, my goals, and my expectation was, if I'm honest, was that being a Christian meant that Jesus would come alongside and make all that work out for me, that he would bless it all, but it was still my plan. And what I realized is that Jesus was not interested in being a component of my life, but instead the all-encompassing purpose of my life. So Chuck's book was really, really helpful in enlarging that purpose, as was Schaeffer. So he reiterated the same thing. In terms of spiritual formation, J.I. Packer's Knowing God continues to be a classic. It's just one of the best books ever written on the topic that I think every Christian needs to read. Mere Christianity, of course. I don't know about you, but I read that book every couple of years. And I think I learn something from it every time I read it. I think I've read that book 12 times.
I end up quoting, most of it probably over the course of a year's worth of podcast and Breakpoint This Week episodes with John. So same here.
Yeah. And so we've got, and then we're always curating the reading list. So practically every year, it changes just a little bit. We make some modifications to it. So this next year, we're introducing Thaddeus Williams' book on social justice, which we think is just exceptional and answers a question that has become a source of tremendous confusion in the church. And I think Thaddeus does a great job of answering that question well and providing some sound guidance on how we ought to think about social justice. So that's coming into the curriculum this coming year. Black Lives Matter, critical race theory, all of these things are encapsulated in that. But those would be my favorites. They won't put my book in the curriculum, so I keep pleading with Bill to do that. That would be my favorite. My mother says that's the best book ever written since Mere Christianity, but that's my mom.
Well, hey, mom's votes count for at least 5 or 6. For sure. You could be one of those professors who assigns his own textbook, and then it's the most expensive book on the list, and then you maybe like refer to it twice during the class. But
Right.
the secret is at the end, when you write your capstone or your thesis, you just make a bunch of references to the professor's book, and he'll give you an A.
Yeah, you're done.
Yeah. Well, Michael, tell me a bit. We've talked about entering the program, and then what prospective students can expect. What does it look like after the fact now? Because there are, as I understand it, about 2,000, maybe a little more than 2,000 commissioned fellows at this stage. And that includes those who were commissioned as centurions. And they'll say, hey, I'm such and such, C, 6 or whatever. And it represents the cohort or the year with which they graduated. Tell us about what some of these folks are doing, because obviously, I hear about all the time about the impact and the places of influence that many of these commissioned fellows have ended up in and are able to work out all that they learned over the course of the program.
Yeah, that's an important feature of the program. It's the phrase we use is once a Colson Fellow, always a Colson Fellow, and that's more than just a saying. We have a very strong emphasis. Of course, the Colson Fellows program itself is a rigorous equipping program, but it is connected to a mobilization strategy as well. So Colson Fellows become part of the Colson family, and they really do. If you consider, for example, just how we deliver the program through online cohorts, regional cohorts, international cohorts, we have over 350 Colson Fellows that volunteer in those respective capacities. So without them, we could not deliver the program as far and wide as we're able to do. So you have a lot of Colson Fellows that remain involved in their cohort, in the leadership of their cohorts. A lot of Colson Fellows will then start new cohorts. We see additional cohorts starting where we have had long established cohorts. We now got a second, third, et cetera. We've got more and more Colson Fellows that are moving into leading online cohorts and international cohorts. So they remain very deeply connected to the program and the mission. We also resource them. So there's just a lifetime of benefits to being a Colson Fellow, not least of which is you have access for the rest of your life to this curriculum, which, as I said earlier, changes year to year. So Colson Fellows get to sit in on webinars when we have new speakers and new topics, and those are, of course, always occurring every year. We source them with materials such as Introduction to Worldview training courses and programs that they then take out to their churches, to local communities where they're serving, their small groups, Bible studies, things like that. So we're equipping them with some resources that they can begin to duplicate themselves and bring other Christians into this worldview way of thinking about their faith and the world in which we live.
Yeah. So the wrong way to think about this is I'm entering a 10-month program, then I'm going to graduate and move on with my life. The right way to think of it is I'm becoming involved with this growing community of people who are continually you not only have access to the all of the materials that come out each year from the Colson Fellows, but also are continually sharing their experiences and taking advantage of the way the program itself has grown. It's kind of like you said, once a Colson Fellow, always a Colson Fellow. It's kind of an ongoing commission.
It is, and I only mentioned those that remain involved with the Colson Center. There are myriads of Colson Fellows that have gone on to start ministries, their own 501c3s. I think, for example, of one couple in the Los Angeles area that had a passion for discipling business leaders to really develop in them a robust theology of work and economics. So when they went to work, they didn't treat their work as an instrumental good, but in fact saw their work, theologically speaking, as an intrinsic good, that through the good of work, they could manifest the kingdom of God. They could advance the kingdom of God. They could They could resist the effects of the fall, and again, in doing that, deepening that individual's understanding of their purpose and their calling. That we don't all have to leave the business world to go into quote unquote full-time ministry. We're in full-time ministry everywhere. And so we've just seen Colson Fellows do some of the most amazing things, from not only domestically, but on the foreign mission field, and with some pretty creative initiatives. And Colson Fellows that are commissioned through the program, they have access to that body of knowledge, to these fellows and to their plans and strategies. How did you do what you did?
There's this passage in C.S. Lewis's Miracles, which is one of the most incredible books I've ever read. But he talks about how the disillusion of tradition, authority, and the sort of liturgies of life that held sway when Christianity was dominant in the West could be seen one of two ways. It can either be seen as this disaster where knowledge has been democratized, and so everyone's basically deprived of the truth now, and they no longer have the means of making sense of their world because there's nobody leading them. Or you could look at it as, he says, an opportunity for mankind to really grow up, where each person is now individually responsible for ascending to the height, the heights where the sages used to occupy and where they used to proclaim these truths to the people. And it sounds very much to me like that's the sort of thing going on with the Colson Fellows program, where you mentioned this ubiquity of calling, right? That's a Protestant principle that goes back, and we have plenty of Catholics in the Colson Fellows program, just to be clear, but that's a principle that was emphasized very early in the Reformation, that all believers have this sacred calling, whatever it is they happen to do, from 9 to 5. And the same thing is true of the Colson Fellows. I feel like a lot of, when I meet fellows who have been in this for a while, who've been commissioned and who are putting their calling into action, or even those who've just entered the program and the lights are beginning to come on for them in a lot of ways. One of the consistent themes that emerges is this idea that, well, hey, I thought my pastor, was really the one in full-time ministry. And I thought that apologists and people who work at the Colson Center and things like that, well, those are the experts who are on the, the heights of the sages. They're the ones who are supposed to be ministering. And then I'll just glean a few things, take advantage of that for my personal piety when I go to work to earn a paycheck. That whole way of looking at things gets completely upended in the Colson Fellows program, because it's this invitation to ascend the heights yourself, to get into this mindset that God has called me in whatever job I'm in, whatever vocation I have, whether it's a CEO or a homemaker or a teacher or a ministry leader or a pastor or a cook or someone in academia. Anything can be done to the glory of God. As I think maybe it was Tyndale or Luther, I'm getting them mixed up, who said that there's no difference betwixt the washing of dishes and the preaching of the word as touches pleasing God. And that is the realization that seems to come over many of the Colson Fellows. And it's really an exciting moment for them, because they understand, many of them for the first time, that I can serve God where I'm at. I don't have to become a member of a 501c3. I have to get ordained as a pastor. Although, if you feel called to that, you should. What an amazing realization. If Lewis's vision of people who are like this universal priesthood of wise teachers, people who have ascertained that knowledge and can minister to one another, if that's going to come about, it's going to be through something very much resembling the Colson Fellows program.
Yeah, and the neat thing is it's not just a shift in the way one thinks. It's not just a shift in their perception. It's a shift that begins with a shift in thinking and perception, but results in a shift in the way they actually live. And so suddenly the way they're thinking, the way they're living is more deeply connected with God's mission and God's purpose in the world. And now they're going, oh, I get it now. I am living in the center of where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm a doctor. That is my ministry. That is the thing that God has called me to do for his glory.
Yeah.
I don't have to go anywhere else.
Yeah. It's beautiful to see. There's almost this moment where it at a point in the program throughout that 10 months where you see the switch happen. You see somebody gets it, and their life gets larger. And shouldn't the Christian life be among the largest?
Yeah.
Shouldn't people look at us and go, wow, that's the life I want to live. That's a big life. That's a glorious life. It's a happy life. It's a joyous life. It is a life that drinks everything up good in this world and recognizes from whom it comes, and lives for that one in every way. That's how we're meant to live. It's like you said earlier, the goal of our salvation is to become fully realized human beings.
Right.
This may be a surprise to some, but we don't become angels, right?
Yeah.
So
that's the first week of the Fellows program. We get basic theology straight, and then
you don't become an angel,
and
you're not one now.
How has you mentioned earlier that, and on the website there's a prominent mention of the network, and that's something that I alluded to a moment ago with these 2,000 plus commissioned fellows who are just out there living out their callings, doing the things that God has put their hands to. How does that work out? Why is that network so powerful? Are there some particular stories or ways that you've seen commissioned fellows take advantage of the fact that there are so many of them out there?
Yeah. Well, and that network is actually connected. So we have an alumni association that is able to connect with one another through our alumni portal. So you can search for people from your class all over the country. You can search for people by profession. So let's say, for example, you're going to a particular city and you're an attorney and you want to see if there are any other attorneys in that city who are Colson Fellows. Maybe you're on business. Maybe you have an objective and you want to be connected to somebody that you feel like you can trust and that thinks the way you think. It's a resource that connects people that way, and we've just seen a multitude of opportunities emerge from those connections. And it's kind of how we as Christians are supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be part of the same family, whether we live locally together or abroad. We're all part of the same family, and it gives us it gives our Colson Fellows a means of remaining in connection with one another, as well as observing and listening to some of the things that other people are doing. We produce a monthly newsletter that profiles a Colson Fellow each week, that is often inspiring and may prompt somebody who's trying to do something similar. They have somebody they can reach out to, and there's just this massive body of support that you can reach out to for questions and some guidance, and it's just proven very, very helpful.
Explain to me the intersection of the Colson Fellows program and the church here. It's specifically, I'm thinking of the listener who is maybe a pastor or an elder or someone who's in a position to start groups and ministries at a church, and they're very interested in this. They're hearing this and thinking, this sounds like exactly what I want to do with my church. How can they get involved, not just themselves, but as a church? Because I know there are quite a few that work things out this way. Yeah.
Well, here at the Colson Center, as you know, we have always believed that we exist to serve the church and the building up of the body. We do not replace the church. We do not supplant the church. We exist to serve the church. If we were Catholic, we'd be an order of the church, right? At least we'd want to be. And this year, we are doing something different. We're piloting a church affiliate program. And I am particularly excited about this because it takes this program and it enables the church to deliver this fellows program in their own environment, led by their own leaders that we have trained. So in other words, First Baptist Church of whatever can have its own proprietary Colson Fellows cohort. It is offered by that church. It is led by that church, the leadership of that church, or lay people within the church, again, all of whom we've trained. And we continue to resource them year in, year out, train new leaders year in, year out, and do so at a pretty dramatic reduction in tuition through a licensing agreement with those churches. But we've been getting increasing numbers of requests from church leadership for a program like the Colson Fellows program, because they recognize the need among their congregation that people want to understand the times in which they live. They're looking for answers to, in the realm of public theology. How do I live in the wake of this issue or that issue? And, what do I tell my children? How do I advise them? How do I do this? How do I do that? The questions that are emerging in this incredibly complicated and confusing culture just seem to be spinning up at a pace that is just unparalleled. And I think it's creating a great deal of confusion in the church. I can tell you just in the last several months, the number of calls that I have received personally from Colson Fellows all over the country who are dealing with the influence of misguided forms of social justice movements in their churches has been staggering to me. And what it reveals is there's just a tremendous amount of confusion within many, many churches. And to be honest, some of these issues are very confusing. They require a lot of understanding, a lot of thought applied to really discern what is true and what is good and what is beautiful, what is of God and what is not of God. These answers don't just, they don't come on the cover of the, mission statement. You've got to figure out what's going on. So you're just seeing it have that kind of impact in churches, and we believe that by offering churches the opportunity to deliver this program to their congregations, that it would serve them.
Yeah, what a great idea. That's I remember receiving that question a number of years ago, and there wasn't the kind of answer that you just gave me with this affiliate program that they're that you're piloting here. So what a cool idea. I hope a lot of people take advantage of that. Is there, Michael, is there a minimum age for the Colson Fellows program, or maybe a maximum age? I don't know, because I know there are a lot of youth training programs out there. Yeah. But most of the Colson Fellows I meet who are going through the program or who have been commissioned are, adults who are homemakers or career people who are, embedded in their calling right now. They're not really preparing for their calling. What would you say to someone who's maybe a bit younger who thinks this sounds good? When can I get involved?
Yeah, it is definitely a program for adults. Now, the question is when does that occur? And,
right.
This year, we have an 18-year-old student in the program.
Okay.
But she is an exceptional 18-year-old. She's a graduate of Summit Ministries. And so she has been raised in a home where she was inculcated with rich theological instruction, spiritual formation, and worldview teaching. And she was looking to go even deeper. And based on her application and interview, we had a conversation with her because to be honest, I was quite concerned about an 18-year-old going through this program. Right. And she's just done marvelously. So she's been outstanding. And we want more young people in the program. The average age of our student is 51 years old. So it's come down a little bit. It initially did tend toward older adults, but that was largely because the program was a lot more expensive. Today, the program is the least expensive it has ever been because we wanted to make it more accessible to more people. And so we wanted to reduce those barriers to entry, which were namely time and money. And so we've done that. Tuition this year is $900. So I'm sure when I said that, people are going to wonder, well, how much does it cost? Right. And then there's some expenses for books, which are another $200. But we have payment plans and we have limited scholarships available. But that's kind of the range, 18, 21 is ideal. I wouldn't recommend going through the Colson Fellows program while you're going to college. That's going to be a challenge. to do that simultaneously. But we have such an incredible range of learners, everybody from seminary and university presidents to homeschool moms. And I love homeschool moms. I think homeschool moms change the world more than anybody else every day. So we welcome them.
Well, they're going to immediately put all that to work in the classroom / bedroom too.
That's
so,
right.
Or living room, kitchen, wherever you say. I was homeschooled, so I know there's not really one room. It's kind of every room is wherever you happen to settle for the day. That's where you're going to do your school.
Yeah.
Well, as we close here, Michael, give me a word for someone who has heard all this and is just kind of wavering, isn't quite sure this is the program for them. What kind of questions should that person be asking as they make a decision?
Well, here's what I would offer. Every year we poll our students. And as I indicated earlier, when we ask them why they enrolled in the Colson Fellows program, we always get similar answers. I wanted to go deeper into worldview. I wanted to learn worldview. I thought there were gaps in my worldview understanding. But then we ask them after they complete the program, did it meet your expectations? And one student responded this past year in such a way that I thought encapsulates most people's experience after they've gone through the program. And I'll read this to you. It's very brief. But he says, this is a transformational program which compresses a lifetime of Christian wisdom into 10 months of very intensive learning. It will fill in the holes in your foundational knowledge of what God teaches us in regards to the creation narrative, and how origin, identity, morality, fall, redemption, and restoration all go together powerfully and coherently for the Christian. We then measure this worldview framework to our preconceived human biases and to the issues and controversies that plague society today. As thinkers and leaders in our communities, we are stewards of all God has surrounded us with, and we are to be neighbors to all whom we can impact. And this program gives us the fundamentals, the guidelines for thinking biblically, a lifetime support structure, the data to inform others, and the encouragement of examples of the faithful. And I just could not say it better myself. I just thought that was so exceptional, and I think it's true.
That's a 5-star review if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. But that first sentence, it is a transformational program. That's what I see time and time again. It is life-changing to people in a really wonderful, beautiful way. And it's what keeps us so excited about this program. It's what makes me so passionate about this program, because you get to see people enter into this enlarged Christian life. And that's exciting.
Well, my guest today has been Michael Craven, corporate executive turned apologist, urban minister, author, and now the director of the Colson Fellows program. To find out more about getting involved in this incredible year-long experience, just check out colsonfellows.org and you can sign up there. Michael, thanks so much for joining me today on Upstream, brother. Keep up the amazing work.
Thank you, Shane. You too. Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Upstream with Shane Morris. For resources and more commentary on Christianity and culture, visit colsoncenter.org. Upstream with Shane Morris is a production of the Colson Center Podcast Network.